Hi, this is Susan Hibbert. I'm the Deputy Director of the BUILD Initiative. And just to start with the most mundane of things, if you'd like to mute yourself now, you can do it by pressing *6. We'd like to keep you all unmuted as opposed to having the whole webinar muted, just so that you'll be able to jump in easily by pressing *7 when you want to ask a question or make a comment. But there's always so much background noise. So if you could just press *6 when you get on and *7 when you want to speak. So today we're having a webinar on the Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships, making the most of it. And I just wanted to say a couple words about how BUILD is thinking about it and to welcome you to this webinar. We've been working hard in the last several weeks thinking about how to maximize this great opportunity for babies, how to make sure that it's a chance not just for additional slots, but that it's a chance for states and territories to advance best policies and practices for children, and to use this opportunity as a chance to build systems for babies. So we wanted to invite you to a conversation that is probably quite different from the conversation that many people are having about early Head Start child care partnerships. Not one that's really about the federal to local opportunity, but Jerry, can you move back? Sorry. But one that is about how to take advantage of this from the state systems perspective. And we'll say more at the end of the webinar about other ways that we and others are working to help state leaders and community leaders think about how to make the most of this opportunity to build community hubs, to change it from something where you're thinking about a program vision to thinking about a whole community vision and a community perspective, how to think about it in terms of alignment of, with state systems, and how to think about it as an opportunity to think better about and work better to ensure continuity for children and families. So that's the sort of perspective of this webinar, and we didn't invite a ton of people to it. It wasn't something that we were looking at as a mass communication about early Head Start child care partnerships, but really a conversation starter for us with state leaders with whom we have worked closely over the years. So there are about 17 states in the District of Columbia on the webinar today. 10 of them are BUILD partner states, and then 7 other states with whom we work. And we very much would like to have a conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen Ponder in a minute, and you'll hear about a few presenters who will kick it off for us and help share their experiences. But we'd love to hear your thinking, what's going on in your state, what your hopes and worries are, how you're wrapping your brain around this opportunity, and what challenges you see in it, because we hope in the next few months that we'll be working closely with you to help maximize the opportunity. There are going to be lots of webinars in the very near future that ACF is organizing, and there are lots of materials that federal staff are putting up on the web. At the end, we'll have a few websites on the PowerPoint, and we'll send it to you after the call, make it available to you so that you have those. And we'll continue to keep in communication with you about other resources that federal staff and other organizations are putting out. But there is lots of information that is coming or that already exists about very specific details related to the applications and past partnership efforts. So that's a very important thing to avail yourselves of. It's probably different from the kind of information that we'll be supplying. I wanted to mention that Sherry Killens and Judy Wright-Parker are also on the call but are not listed as presenters, and they've been working for BUILD on this early Head Start child care partnership work. So they'll probably chime in, and they may be people that you get in touch with over the next few weeks about next steps. And again, the mundane, *6 to mute yourself and *7 to unmute. We'll keep reminding you of that. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Karen Ponder. She seemed like the perfect person to facilitate this webinar and to help lead the work for BUILD on early Head Start child care partnerships, because she always has the community perspective in mind, the state perspective in mind, and a constant love and commitment, a commitment to babies and love of babies. So that seemed like an important quality to have for the moderator. She helped develop North Carolina's Smart Start initiative and worked directly with the local communities to develop the program. And she served as the program director and president of Smart Start and helped to create Smart Start's National Technical Assistance Center, which helped so many of you and other states create statewide systems that included local partnerships or local initiatives. So all of those qualities seem really important to our thinking as we try to think about this opportunity. So Karen, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Susan, and thanks for your leadership to the BUILD team to provide this opportunity for us just to think and talk and ask questions, some that may not even have answers yet, but to stimulate all of our thinking about building partnerships to help ensure good outcomes for children and families in our communities. You know, the idea of partnering is certainly not new, but I do think we're getting better and better at building true partnerships with children and families at the heart of the partnership. This federal opportunity now, the Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships, is one that has mutual benefits to the children, families, to programs, to communities, and to states. And so we're looking forward to hearing from people who've really done this work, particularly at the state and local level. I want to just put on the screen some of the things that we all have in common in this work. So both state and community and Head Start and Early Head Start leaders have these things that they're all working together to achieve. So they all have an interest in quality, in making early childhood a higher quality in all the settings that we provide for them. They each have an interest in comprehensive services, and as you know, Head Start has long been the model for us in this area. But there's a lot we can share. The educator development is so important in all the arenas, and there's a lot going on in many states. Head Start and Early Head Start are partnering with the state to do better development of educators. All are concerned about and are typically funding various aspects of screening and formative assessments. They each have a focus on family and community engagement and are critical to both state and Head Start programs. They each have school readiness objectives. It seems like we're all working on school readiness, and often from a little bit of a different perspective. There's a desire in states and in Head Start programs to manage transitions and provide a continuum of services, birth to 8, along with all the partners that it takes to do that well. And certainly we're all working on increased compensation. That's one we've got to work harder on, but it's important to all of our work. And then we're all working to use Early Head Start standards, not just to write them, but how do we use them in a more meaningful way to inform both classroom goals and individual child outcomes and work, and then in our practices in our classrooms. And so we're continually building linkages and partnerships in all of our work. So today I'm especially pleased to introduce Joan Lombardi, who is someone that is no stranger to any of us who have worked in early childhood, and who deserves great recognition for her leadership and for taking action. You know, some people talk about issues. Joan Lombardi does something about it. And she's played key roles from both inside and outside of government and has been quite the visionary, the policy leader, and even a funder, just to name a few of her roles that she's played so well. Joan is currently a consultant to the Buffett Early Childhood Foundation. Joan, we thank you for all you've done and for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Karen. I can't think of a better person to lead this, and you've taught us all so much. So thank you for that, and I hope it warms up down there in North Carolina.
Thank you.
It's really great to join everybody. This is the first time I'm talking to some of you in a long time, and I just want to start by thanking everybody for your wonderful work on systems development, for all of you that worked on the challenge, and hopefully all of those efforts are paying off. What's been exciting for me to watch is how these common elements have been coming together across the different program specific focus that we've had traditionally. Now we're kind of turning to a different, with a different lens. The new resources, unlike the challenge where they were systemic, are more focused on program. I think this is a great opportunity because it does provide resources that we're all so much in need of. But I think as we think programmatically, we have to now fit them together with the systems think, and that's what this effort is all about. Obviously there's opportunities both on the preschool side and on the early Head Start side. I'm particularly excited about the opportunities that are provided by the early Head Start child care partnerships. As many of you know that have been around this for a long time, partnerships were actually at the center of early Head Start from the beginning in 1995 because early Head Start grew at the same time as welfare reform. So there were some early partnerships, and I think there's a lot of experience out there that we can draw from. At the same time, with our expansion, we did another round of early Head Start funding, and that also resulted in terrific models that have emerged across the country, some of which you'll hear about today. So this effort really brings us to a whole nother level where we have additional resources going into this specifically and a call for these partnerships. I think the greatest part about the opportunity here is that we've all been most concerned that the quality of infant-toddler child care for working families with kids under 3 has been one of the most neglected areas in the field. We've got 3 million children under 3 in poverty, yet early Head Start's only serving about 5% of them. We have great facts out there, both from the McCormick or Infant Toddler Report and from the 0 to 3 fact sheets that can help take that 3 million child number into your states to start the conversation with the tremendous need you have in the states among children in poverty with working families. I think I want to make sure that we all go into this conversation acknowledging the strengths of both systems, of both the child care side and the early Head Start side. I remember Helen Taylor and I in the 90s used to talk about how child care covers that full day and really has challenges doing that. Early Head Start brings a depth of service. So together it's really a win-win for both generations. We have begun to see some information coming out of the federal level. Let me start with the overall amount. As many of you know, there's $500 million that will be available for grants to high-quality infant toddler care through the early Head Start child care partnerships. Many of you have heard the budget that came out this week. The President's proposed more funding going into this. So I think this is just the beginning of something that's going to hopefully grow. ACF has put out some slides that some of you probably have seen, but let me just go over 2 of them and the data that some of the points that they made on their webinars. First of all, this is to support states and communities in expanding high-quality early learning and development opportunities for infants and toddlers. The applicants who demonstrate partnership will join with child care providers who agree to meet high standards. I think there's a real sense here that there's a goal of improving the quality of child care across the country by adding additional resources. Also to enhance and support early learning settings, providing full-day comprehensive services that meet the needs of working families so that families don't have to choose between work and those comprehensive services, particularly around health and family support and some of the professional development elements. We know that the funds will be awarded competitively through the Early Head Start grant process. There was some information put out about the timeline. We'll come back to that, but I think the timeline, it may be earlier than we originally anticipated. All agencies are eligible to apply for partnership competitive grants, including tribes, territories, communities, nonprofits, for-profits, state and local governments. So Early Head Start, right from the beginning, had a much broader eligibility. So I think that's another reason this is such a great opportunity. They are going to consider Early Head Start options, center-based, family child care, and combination. So there's not one specific model that they're looking for. I think it's really up to us to think creatively, and all of you, to partner, to plan, and to really innovate. This is an opportunity to build an infrastructure that we can continue to grow over the next few years for how to support high-quality full-day services for children under 3. It's one of the only opportunities I've seen in a long time to do that, so I'm hoping that we all take advantage of that, think creatively, work together, get through the many challenges that are involved here, and move it forward, because I think it's a win-win.
Thank you, Joan. That's exactly the overview we needed and the energy for us to really use this opportunity to do big things for little babies. So thanks again for your leadership, and we hope you'll hang here with us.
I will.
Now we're going to stop the flow for a second and take a little poll, because we want a sense of kind of where you're thinking now before this we engage in the rest of this conversation. But what are you and your state sort of thinking? So if you look on your screen, it says our state, and check as many as apply there. You're thinking about applying as a state already. You're helping your local collaboratives, like your community collaboratives or partnerships, apply. You're targeting communities to partner with. You're just beginning to pay attention to this, or you're nowhere thinking about it yet, but that doesn't mean you won't jump right in. So choose the ones that work for your state, that you kind of give us a sense of that, and we'll look at the results. Any other instructions we need, Jerry?
Nope. If everybody will put their votes in, and then when it slows down, we'll skip to the results.
Okay.
I'll close the poll.
And also, as you think of questions, if you don't want to interrupt the flow of someone who's speaking, feel free to write them in the chat box in the lower left-hand corner. But also, if a question is burning, press *7 and raise it at any time.
It looks like we're getting there. I bet there's some conversations going on about where you think you are. And, two people in a state could actually have a different interpretation of that. So there are no right answers or wrong answers.
And it's an anonymous poll, so we're not going to know what you're picking either. It looks like we can close it now.
We'll look for the results. Wow. It looks like a lot of people are really just now beginning to focus their attention to it. So it's very interesting. A lot of people, a third of the respondents are thinking about applying as a state. So that'll be new territory for all but one of our states. And then many are helping their local collaborative apply. And so we've got some, and everybody is somewhere, so that's great. Any observations about that from anybody else?
We just had one comment that some people are thinking about this but have not necessarily yet got state partners. So they might be thinking about it statewide and targeting communities, but they might not be a state per se.
Right, and I see Seal has asked, what about efforts that don't involve state agencies? And I would let one of you answer that.
Well, I mean, I think that not involving a state agency, you as an advocacy organization could be helping local partnerships or supporting specific communities where you know there's high needs to make sure they have the resources that are necessary to apply. I think Joan mentioned this will be a local or federal application at the end of the day.
Great.
But the eligibility is completely open, so we just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I love that it's really open to creative ways of doing it. I think it will allow some new models maybe to emerge, so that's exciting. There's another question about this. How would the Board of Directors and the Policy Council work if a state, any thoughts on that?
I think that's just the kind of question that Tracy can touch upon as she speaks, and then we'll make sure that for those of you who are thinking of applying as a state that we help to connect you to those who have experience.
And I think on some of these very technical issues, I would assume that ACF will be putting out a Q&A, set of Q&As that will give us better clarity along with the request for proposals.
Exactly. So keep in mind that, none of us is speaking for the agency.
Yes.
And none of us knows exactly what the final proposal will look like. So these are informed ideas and thoughts as we move on. So let's move now to, I'm always happy when we talk about these kinds of things, when we have people join us who've actually done them or done something along the line. And so we're very pleased to have two wonderful participants today. Tracy Campanini, who is the director of the Head Start State Collab Office in Pennsylvania, and that office is administered by the Office of Child Development and Early Learning, which we all affectionately call OCDALE. This is a joint office between the Pennsylvania Department of Public Welfare and the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and most of you know of the amazing changes and good results that they have achieved in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the only state early Head Start grantee, and they applied through ARA funding. So Tracy will share with us Pennsylvania's approach, what Pennsylvania was thinking when they applied for ARA funds, and then share their implementation model. Tracy, we're so glad to have you, and please talk to us.
Thank you, Karen, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background frame of reference of where Pennsylvania started its engagement with Early Head Start as a grantee and where we are now, and just some food for thought as we transition on to others in the conversation. When we had the opportunity back in 2009 to apply as a state grantee for the ARA funds, Pennsylvania, our Office of Child Development and Early Learning, is very keen on data collection and analysis. And at that time, as Karen had mentioned, we have a blended office of DPW and the Department of Education, so our office serves families prenatally through the time they transition into kindergarten. We have, at that time, had a very robust preschool offering in terms of programs across the Commonwealth, and we were really looking to expand our infant-toddler supports. And so this idea of applying for Early Head Start funds really came about in the office's mind as a way to extend that continuum of services for families further into the infant-toddler aspect. Utilizing the data that we have a great resource in Pennsylvania called Reach and Risk, which collects all types of salient data points and allows us to be able to look at data very quickly and help prioritize where we're seeing gaps in services. So as we were pondering through this application, we were looking in Pennsylvania where there were no services for Early Head Start existing at that time, but that there were also not a lot of resources available to families across the infant-toddler spectrum at all. Our initial application for Early Head Start services, which was a much larger ask than what we were originally were granted in terms of our award, based on the communities that we identified through our risk and reach and having some follow-up conversations to see if the local Head Start agencies were making application, we felt that 400 slots for Early Head Start in Pennsylvania across the counties we identified would be a great place to start. Where we ended up is our funded slot award was 128 slots to serve pregnant women, infants, and toddlers. Now, there's two aspects of our program that folks may be interested in. There's the idea of OCDEL being a state grantee. And then there's also our experience where we arrayed the services across our Commonwealth in 5 different, very distinct and separate geographical areas because we prioritized the neediest communities to receive those awards. Pennsylvania is 310 miles from east to west, and we have grantees in our original model from the eastern side to the western side. So there's the aspect of really working with programs across a lot of geography that we had to develop strategies and systems to support as well. Just as we start out the conversation, it's really clear to understand that in the eyes of the Office of Head Start, we look and act just like any other local grantee. We do not have any waivers of any of the performance standards, and so as we began to implement our partnerships with the providers in the local communities, OCDEL serves as the grantee, so we are the entity that is responsible for ensuring that full compliance with programs. When we were notified of our successful grant awards, we went into a state procurement process for eligible applicants to serve infants and toddlers to apply for funds from their local community. And we asked them to identify, help identify further their specific ability to address the community need, their ability to meet the staff complement, and whether or not they were interested in delivering home-based or center-based slots. So as we began to implement that structure, our initial model ended up with 8 partners in 5 counties. And some of the lessons that we learned that I think are critical is in establishing any partnership, and I'm sure many of you have had this experience, it's really critical to allow sufficient planning time. It's really important as entities begin to think about what partnerships mean, that there is clearly articulated understanding of what the goals are. As silly as it may seem, it's important to make sure that everybody understands the common language. And we encountered some initial challenges where as the grantee, we were beginning to understand very clearly what the expectations were around the federal performance standards and the federal language, but our partners, not having had that experience, weren't necessarily understanding at the same level or were misunderstanding commonly talked about activities. And so that making sure that the partnership has that opportunity to clearly have everybody on the same page is very important. With providers spread across 5 counties, I would suggest that another lesson for folks is really to be able to take time to do the team building and understanding and developing a common identity, that when you're working in a partnership, It took a little while for our partners to transition away from their initial identity of a child care or their initial identity as a home visiting program to also incorporate the fact that they were part of our Commonwealth Early Head Start grant. And that identity is important to be able to move forward with our common goals. Again, with any partnership, developing clear systems to communicate to all levels of the partners, their staff, and be able to have that communication go in both directions is critical to the success of the partnership, and especially a partnership that spans a lot of geography. I think that the other piece that was a real lesson for us is making sure that we had sufficient staff complement and planning around the support that partners need. And as we moved into becoming an ongoing Early Head Start grantee, we did some restructuring to better be able to support our partners. And that was based off of, the ongoing continuous self-assessment and planning that occurs as a function of being an Early Head Start program. So as we are transitioning into the current time, through those processes and through conversations with our partners, we restructured our program model. We now are currently partnering with 2 community-based entities, and based on the needs of those very at-risk communities, we're providing at this time home-based services to those 128 children or their families. So I'm thinking that's probably about the highest level of detail I can get to, but I just want to reiterate, in the eyes of the office, we're no different than any local grantee, and it's been thrilling, and our partners have been great. And one thing that I would also add is the experience of being involved from a state office level and being so deeply engaged with our local partners really gives us different perspective as we approach planning and activities at the state level for our systems enhancements. And I think that's been a great experience. So Karen, I'm going to hope that I addressed the salient points and turn it back to you.
Well, you absolutely did. I'm curious, Tracy, what do you see as probably the 3 most important things that the state could offer to this partnership?
Well, I think one of the things that has been great from our perspective is the ability to access other resources that the state office is able to provide. So we have a great system in place in terms of connections with early intervention, in connections with our state CCDF fund office, which supports the QRIS system. And then, of course, being a state office, we are constantly analyzing information and developing supportive practices and modules to provide professional development. So I think that connection to being able to take those experiences and provide enhanced supports has been a benefit to our partners that has occurred being a state-level grantee. There's probably a lot embedded in that.
Yeah, you unpack that in a lot of ways. Prior to this grant opportunity, had you already developed relationships with your Head Start, Early Head Start community, and did that sort of put you on the right footing to do this, or was this sort of the impetus for that?
Well, in Pennsylvania, there's a long history of providing grant funding to programs to expand enrollment slots. So I believe beginning in 2004, 2005, the Commonwealth made available state supplemental funding for Head Start preschool slots. So we had a relationship as an office with those grantees. Also, there are a number of other state-funded home visitation programs, and of course, the child care system that is engaged in our Keystone Stars. The state, through its partners, has relationships with those entities. In terms of the state being a grantee, there's a mixed reaction to the state being an Early Head Start grantee. And it's changed since we've applied, but initially there was a lot of angst about our application to submit to be considered as a federal applicant.
I'm curious if other individual programs also applied, so were you sort of, I mean, could it been perceived as competition?
Well, it was definitely perceived as competition, and we are only one of many grantees that were awarded ERA funds for the expansion in Pennsylvania. Again, when we were doing our planning, and I said we had an ambitious 400-slot initial application to really address what we felt was the unmet need in various counties and communities. We had done some outreach to understand whether or not the local programs were going to be applying in those communities. So we did try to avoid putting forth communities that would have an application coming into Early Head Start from it. When award is being negotiated from the Office of Head Start to a grantee, they determine the service area that the grantee will be serving, and so then they narrowed down the number of counties that we applied for to the 8 counties that, or the 5 counties, I'm sorry, that we ended up serving. So there were several other grantees that also received ERA Early Head Start funding and have continued to serve those increased enrollments.
Karen, can I just add a few comments here? Tracy, it's really great to hear the excitement in your voice about the partnerships, and I think you've a lot of really important tips. I just want to remind people that ARA was twice as much money as we have here, so there was ample room for other communities to apply. That one of the things that I think I wanted to reinforce that Tracy mentioned was the importance of each group learning about the other, and ACF has in their webinars been trying to do that to really get people to understand what are the Early Head Start, what's Early Head Start all about, and what's child care really all about. These are Early Head Start grants, so we need to make sure we go into this knowing that, and I think, Tracy, you reinforced that. And then lastly, you mentioned that you didn't have any waivers. There is no waiver authority in the Head Start Act. So, I think on that note, there won't be, this will be like all the other Early Head Start announcements that, all the Early Head Start provisions prevail. I think what's different about this from ARA is the specificity around the partnerships.
Thank you, Jen. Judy, you have a question.
Yes, I do. Tracy, some states have said they wouldn't want to apply because they would view it as being a services provider, which they don't want to be. And I think that one could argue that many states already are one way or the other. But I'm wondering if you all had that discussion prior to applying and what that process was like.
Sure. The discussion we entered into and created our application for submission, putting forth that we were not going to be a direct service provider. We submitted the model. We worked very closely with a private entity that also helps to support the implementation and management of the other state-funded initiatives. It's the Pennsylvania Key, and at that time they were responsible for the monitoring and technical assistance for our state-funded Head Start investment, which was about 4,500 slots, and then our Pennsylvania Pre-K Counts public investment, which at that time was around, I would say, 9,500 slots. So as we submitted our application and laid out our structure, we included that relationship between Octel as the grantee, the role that they would play, the role that our partner, the PAT, would play, and then we outlined the process where we would be targeting eligible providers in the communities that we identified as being the neediest to come in to be the direct service provider. So that's how we took the approach. There are activities that we have to do as the grantee, and so we are responsible for those elements. But in terms of actually being out and providing the services to children and their families, we have a partnership. That's what our partnership involves.
Okay, thanks. We're going to move to hear Kate, and then we'll have another opportunity for, it looks like we're going to have plenty of time for questions. So keep thinking of what you want to ask, and it can be a small question or a big philosophical question, but we want to get those out so we can have a richer, very rich discussion. This picture just makes my day, so it's a real privilege to introduce, is somebody asking a question? Sorry. It's a privilege to introduce Kate Irish to you. Kate is currently a stay-at-home mom of 2 daughters in Durham, North Carolina. But prior to that, she worked at the Smart Start Agency, the North Carolina Partnership for Children, as the Early Care and Education Program Officer, where she worked on statewide policy efforts and managed 2 huge Race to the Top projects. And big kudos to Kate for that work. But before joining Smart Start at the state level, she was the program director at Durham County's Partnership for Children for 6 years and managed Durham's Smart Start work as well as the North Carolina Pre-K program and Early Head Start grants for the Durham community. Kate will share with you some of her lessons learned from managing Early Head Start grants and also creating Durham's model of a partnership between Early Head Start and child care. So Kate, thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted to have you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that introduction and for having me. I'm very excited to share Durham's work, and I have to say, now that I'm a stay-at-home mom of 2 young children, I think I have an even greater appreciation for group-based care now that I'm doing it with just 2 at home. But I'm really pleased to be able to talk about the work that I was part of at Durham's Partnership for Children. Durham's Partnership was one of the grantees that received the ARA expansion grants. I believe it was one of 19 counties in North Carolina. And the Durham program is a mix of home visiting and also center-based slots. And I was going to just share a little bit about our process. We did sort of a community needs assessment and strategic planning process prior to the ARA funds, but it really led into the application that we submitted, and then I would talk a little bit about the application, sort of how we went about doing it, and briefly about the model that we developed. And then hopefully Karen and whoever else can jump in if I've forgotten anything, and can talk about other things too. So as I said, Durham really started with a community needs assessment and strategic planning process, I would say about 6 or 9 months prior to the ARA funds, the ARA application coming out. Durham had really, I think we had heard, that there would be a federal opportunity potentially, so we knew that. But I think besides that, really things had been bubbling up in terms of infant and toddler needs in our community. I think, we all had felt like there had been a lot of progress made in the area of pre-K, and felt like we had come a long way, but really, not feeling like the focus and emphasis has been placed on infants and toddler needs, and really starting to look at the data, it was pretty dramatic that we really needed to do something. And so I think Durham's Partnership, sort of being that local convener, really felt, it was the role of the partnership to bring folks together. And so we really convened a pretty broad group of stakeholders and really tried to be comprehensive and bring all different sectors in, knowing that was really important to any plan about infants and toddlers and their families. So we had an array of different sorts of child care folks. We had health departments, DSS, United Way, center directors. We had the faith community. We had some researchers from local universities. So we tried to have a pretty broad group, and really sort of followed a typical needs assessment process of collecting data, looking at data. I think the one thing we learned too was just having this broad group. When we started looking at the infant and toddler data, as you all know, there's not a lot out there that's broken out in that birth to 3 population. But if you have a group that you've convened and you're all working on this together, there's a lot of folks that have access to data, and if you just ask, they're willing to kind of go back to their own agency, make a request. And so we got some pretty interesting data out of the process, and specific to the birth to 3 population. And we were able to dig a little bit deeper into the child care data as well, which really supported what we already knew, that there were very few high-quality infant and toddler slots in Durham. I think the number that still sticks out in my head is there were only 21 infants that were in subsidized 5-star care when we started the process at that point in time. And just to put it in perspective, there were about 4,000 infants in Durham, and about half of those are low income. So I mean, it was really dramatic. So we sort of knew the child care piece, and I think having such a broad group, we really kept coming back to, yes, we need high-quality child care, but we need comprehensive services, especially for infants and toddlers. There's so many more things that need to happen with health and early intervention and family support. We sort of looked at the data, looked at the needs. We went through a process of mapping out resources, and that's always, I think, surprising and fun because you realize how much you have that you maybe don't realize, and especially in North Carolina, we have so many state resources with the infant toddler specialists and early learning guidelines and things like that. And from there, really went to outline strategies. And I think, we pretty immediately went to Early Head Start as thinking this could be the perfect model because it could include quality child care and all these different comprehensive services. So from that process, we really developed a strategic plan for Durham about infants and toddlers that included a broad range of small and large strategies, short-term and long-term. But really everybody in the room just kept saying, well, when are we going to know about Early Head Start? It has to be Early Head Start. So I think there was just a lot of passion in the room already and just hope that it would somehow, come to fruition. But it was great that we had this strategic plan that outlined a variety of things that Durham has done besides Early Head Start too. So it was a great process. And then, of course, when the ARA funds and application was released, we felt like we were in a good position because we had done a lot of that work already, and certainly in looking at the data and the needs. And so, that really laid the groundwork for developing the application and the model. And I think, we didn't spend too much time patting ourselves on the back about how much work we had already done because we realized how much more we had to do. But I think because we had engaged such a broad group, we were in a pretty good position to then move forward and deepen some of those relationships. As we went along, we could see who the experts were and where the resources were in our community. And I think, at Durham's partnership under the leadership of Marcia Baslow, we always took a collaborative approach. So I think there was no doubt in our mind that the application was going to be collaborative. I think, that's just the Smart Start kind of motto, that it's not about recreating the wheel or doing something on your own, but really looking at who the experts are and how you can work together to build the best system. And I think really that was another thing. The partnership really was looking at how can this Early Head Start grant not just be about the slots, but be about the whole system, and how can we leverage this? So similar to with pre-K, not just for those kids, but how can we transform the system and all the partners so that we have more slots, but we have greater quality for the whole community. So I think, in that really looking at our partners, we had a very strong Healthy Families home visiting program already in Durham, so that was a logical partner for us. We looked to our neighboring county. Orange County had an Early Head Start program already, the Grantees Chapel Hill Training and Outreach Project. So that was one of our first steps there, our neighboring county. We went and visited, talked to their leadership, visited their centers because they also had a child care partnering model. And we immediately found we were pretty well aligned in terms of, how we wanted to think about partnering and the emphasis on quality. So I think that was kind of an early on an early on plan that we would look to be working with Chapel Hill Training and Outreach. And then, we wanted to engage the child care center community, obviously, and one of the things we did during the application process is we hosted information sessions for 4- and 5-star child care centers in the community. I think we had 2 different sessions, and I think one of the things that was really great about that, we did a kind of an Early Head Start 101, which is really important, explaining especially some of the key performance standards, the ratios, the group size. I mean, some of the things that are really, going to be important for centers to understand. But then the other thing we did, we had a child care center director from Orange County who was one of the Early Head Start child care partners. We had her attend the session and, talk a little bit and then be available for questions. And I think that was really powerful. I think the center directors in Durham, they were sort of like, okay, we want to talk to this woman because she's doing it and she knows. And I think some of them even ended up going and visiting her center. So I think that's definitely something I would recommend, as much as you can kind of put, partnering child care centers together with prospective centers. I think that's really powerful. And I think if I had to do it again, I would try to do even more of that, because I think what we saw was some of the centers, in our community, they weren't sure if they could do it. It sounds hard, so they went out and they saw other centers doing it. And I think it also reinforced, okay, we could do this group size. We see this other center making it work. So I think that was a really great thing to do early on to get the centers engaged. And I think we had, and then at some point after we had the information sessions, we had them express interest so that we could put that in our application as well. We had an information session, and X number of centers, said that they would be interested in moving forward with us with Early Head Start, so we could include that. And then I think, as I said, we had met with Chapel Hill Training and Outreach Project, and so that really, kind of having all these different levels of partners, that sort of informed our model development. We ended up developing a model. It's a little bit complex, but where Durham's Partnership for Children would be the grantee agency and would contract with Chapel Hill Training and Outreach Project as the delegate agency that would then basically oversee the day-to-day operations and would contract with the child care centers in our community. So Durham's Partnership had sort of the typical sort of accountability, monitoring, evaluation, reporting type role that is very familiar to the partnership. And then Chapel Hill Training and Outreach as the delegate, they were the ones that had a staff that worked directly with the community-based child care centers. And then as well, they contracted with Healthy Families Durham as a home visiting program. So we had submitted a proposal that was 120 slots. At that time it was 60 home visiting and 60 center-based slots. And for the child care center slots, we blended some funding, which is always the fun part of figuring all of that out, but blended the ARA, Early Head Start money, with Smart Start funds and some child care subsidy as well to be able to offer full-day center-based slots. That was something that came out of our needs assessment that was really important to us and to the community, that we could offer a full-day program for working folks. So I think that was what I was planning on covering. Karen, did that make sense? Did I miss anything that I should have mentioned about how we developed our model?
There's so much to talk about, Kate. It's thrilling to hear the details. I'm just curious. I know that the Durham Partnership has been in the process of building a community around early childhood in a comprehensive way for almost 20 years now, I guess. And I would guess that helped this process. I'm just curious how you would advise local leaders who are in the earlier stages of building the partnerships. I mean, you've mentioned some of the key things, involvement, making sure everybody understands the same information, and bringing people in who've actually had experience. Any other advice to people who are in the earlier stages of developing these kinds of this kind of work together?
Well, I think it's interesting because I think as a partnership, we did have a lot of relationships and we had done a lot of work, but in a way, we had been sort of talking about the birth to 5 continuum and school readiness, and which, just gravitates more towards talking about pre-K type issues. And so I think actually it felt like we were engaging some new partners and a lot of existing partners in a new way about a different conversation. To be able to have a planning process and a series of meetings just about infants and toddlers, we hadn't done that before. So it was sort of felt a little bit new to us, and being able to really focus it in. So I guess I would just say, I think, even if you are at the beginning stages of that process with different partners, I think it's helpful to really be able to be focused in on that age group. I think it's more tangible for people, and it allows you to have different partners than you might have, for pre-K, and deepen those relationships. So I think it was nice that we sort of had the baseline of relationships, but I think it was actually just a little bit different than how we had engaged them before.
Well, and actually builds out your partnership in a different way.
Right.
I love that the focus is infants and toddlers, and we don't have to say, remember the infants and toddlers.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Does anybody, any of our Sherry, Judy, anybody have a specific question? Shall we open it to the larger group for questions? Okay, anybody who has a question, and it can be for Kate, it can be for Tracy, it can be for Joan, or anybody else that's on the call.
And remember, just press *7 to unmute yourself.
Yeah, and just ask the question. You don't have to write it or anything, but just what do you want to know? Do you have a comment about anything you've heard? Let's have a conversation.
Hi, this is Wendy Price from Down East Partnership for Children in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And I have a question. We're wondering, how do the early Head Start standards and the North Carolina Star Rated License standards compare?
And who would you be asking?
I guess I would be asking Kate.
Well, I'm thinking if there's something general about that Kate could tell us. If it's real specific, then maybe we could link y'all up, Wendy, to talk in detail about it. But Kate, you want to? Is there?
Yeah, right. You're right. I can't go into detail, but I will just say that the early Head Start standards are more comprehensive, and more specific in some areas, and more stringent or higher standards, especially in terms of like ratios and group size. So, but it would be great. I don't know if anyone has done sort of like a crosswalk type thing. It would be great to get linked up with something that would show more of a comparison. I don't know if Kari or anyone at the Head Start Collaboration Office has anything like that.
Good idea, though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Several states went through that during their Early Learning Challenge application, where they looked across, especially in developing QRAS. So I bet that in many states that exists, and where it doesn't, I think that's something that needs to be done.
Good idea. That's on our list. Okay, what else? And another, as you think about questions and comments, think about what Build and its partners could do to help you in this kind of short time frame to be better equipped to have a stronger collaboration. I've never seen this group speechless. So
this is Teresa Holly from Illinois. What did you find that you needed to do on the child care side of this to make it work?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was Pennsylvania actually implementing it, like, did you give special rules or special, don't have to be on the wait list? I don't know if you have a wait list, but what did you do to make it work with the child care side of it? Because you can't just do an early Head Start program here.
So this is Tracy. When we had our center-based slots and we partnered with child care, we seen the slot in its entirety with our early Head Start funds. So in our initial model, we weren't trying to figure out the relationship between our early Head Start funds and maybe additional subsidy funds. those are things that we're thinking about now. But in that initial model, we had set a high center-based cost per child and negotiated with those successful child care applicants who were going to become our partners that they were accepting that rate, which was at that time higher than the rates that they were getting through the child care subsidy.
And that's how this is different than the ARA expansion, again, because it has the child care partnership specifically does raise that question, Teresa, about, how do you fit rates into this discussion? How do you talk more with the state about contracts, not just, funding slots through vouchers? Those are all conversations that are going to be important in this discussion.
I'd add, Joan, another piece as we're starting to talk through some of the potential issues is attendance. That's another key thing for folks to think about in the Early Head Start Child Care partnerships, because Early Head Start is so supportive of families and helping them work through whatever their circumstances are, that may not at the present time reconcile with attendance policies.
Wow.
In other words, you have to hold on to them even though they don't show up and, and they hurt your hitting your 85%.
Yeah, making the different regulations and work is certainly a challenge, but they can be done. So what else do you want to know? Or do you want to talk about, or just anybody's thinking about, what you're thinking in your state? Anything you can share will help us be better at giving you resources that will be helpful.
Karen, Alicia in Ohio.
Hey, Alicia.
Hello. I want to, as much as I want to dig into some of the really specific implementation questions, I think we're going to have a slew of questions to have to think about and answer in terms of the value add of a state application versus we have very strong local communities that have initiatives that I'm sure are going to be quite interested. So I know Teresa spoke a little bit, or Tracy, I'm sorry, in Pennsylvania about some of the value add from her perspective. I'm just wondering if some of you who have been working in system building and watching the emergence of state systems getting stronger and clearer and better, kind of if you had to think about the value add, if you were selling why the state should get involved, I'm just curious what you would say.
I think I heard Kate, I'm sorry, Tracy, and you can tell me if I misheard, but it sounds like to me you all chose areas of the state to be involved in that would not have been, that a local Head Start program, there was not one that would have applied, and that was where children were that you, according to your population data, felt like needed services. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. And I think that from our current perspective as we're mulling this opportunity over, our considerations about what we may do as a grantee seeking expansion are one set of things we're pondering, but we are also planning about how we go out and partner with the Pennsylvania Head Start Association as well as our Pennsylvania Child Care Association to start to do those sort of introductory Head Start 101, Child Care 101, so we can help facilitate those partnerships.
Yeah, I think that's really very important because I think what ACF will do is encourage the partnerships, from the government perspective, the public sector perspective, but getting the two associations together in a state, I think is a really important step forward. But the state can play a lot of different roles. It can be convener, as the question you asked. It can provide information. It can help facilitate the child care piece of this. So I think people need to think broadly about that.
I do too, and it can sometimes convene. It can just bring all the partners together in a way. So there are lots of roles to play and lots of ways to draw this. Other questions?
Hi, this is Seal and Cindy from New Jersey, and I feel like you're in the sophomore year. We're still in orientation. I have, I guess, a couple of basic questions. One is how will this money flow? We've been working in a city in Newark, actually, with a group of funders interested in investing in early Head Start. So there's a significant opportunity, I think, to both help to organize the 3 early Head Start programs here, as well as link them with child care. And I guess I don't know enough of how will the money flow if this is a local?
So we're still waiting to find this out.
Oh, well, that makes me feel better, Joan.
Let me just say how it usually happens in an early Head Start competition, the way it happened in ARA, but again, we don't know how. The money is, there's a formula, so basically potential grantees compete for a specific amount of money that is allotted for a particular state. That's the traditional way to do it, that it's done. But we don't know. They could do it a different way, and they haven't ruled on that yet. So, for example, in ARA, there was $1 billion, and there was an allotment chart that was sent out so that the potential grantees in New Jersey would know how much they were potentially competing for. In cases where there weren't eligible applicants, some of that money could be used in different ways. So I think we don't know yet. That's exactly one of the things we're waiting for.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Joan. Who else has a question?
This is Wendy from Downey's Partnership for Children again. We are just wondering, how are the rates, like per child classroom, set for Head Start, early Head Start?
Sherry, you want to take that one on?
Well, I don't have full understanding, but in most instances, the applicant submits a authentic budget of what it costs to do the services. And so Head Start programs in one state or early Head Start programs in one state may actually have different rates because it depends on the model and who their partners are and the cost of delivering the services. So it's a range, and it'll depend, it's a part of the competition. And honestly, in some instances, programs over time have underbidded themselves and therefore get frustrated with others who seem to have a rate that looks better.
And this is Kate, and I would just say in Durham, when we were preparing our proposal, that was very tricky to figure out what the rate should be. I mean, I don't know, I don't know what kind of help or assistance the feds or states could help with, but that was very difficult, especially when you're thinking about blending different funding streams too, and how long or short of the day and that sort of thing. I mean, it did feel a bit like we were sort of guessing, about it. And I think sort of we were, and then you tweak it, as you go, as to some extent. But I do think that's a challenge because there aren't set rates, so you really are trying to figure out what will it cost in your community to do it the way you're envisioning doing it.
I would add, too, for those that are not necessarily familiar with Head Start or Early Head Start, in addition to the direct funding that you would receive from the Office of Head Start, there's also a federal, non-federal share match requirement, which is 20% of the grant funds. And that was one of our lessons in working with our community-based partners who had not had that experience before, is figuring out how we all together were coming up to meet that required match. And that is one of the critical elements I would recommend people take into consideration as they're planning.
This is Judy. I just want to add around that non-federal share that it's nice if it's cash, but it doesn't have to be. And each regional office has some clear definitions about what in kind could be counted. So sometimes the space from a child care program can be counted as in kind in these partnerships. That's just something to consider as well.
Thanks, Judy. Other comments?
These kind of questions about the specifics of early Head Start. I think the best way to find these things out is to start the dialogue with early Head Start programs that do exist, just the way it sounded like Kate did it with the neighboring county.
I agree. What else?
This is Deb. I think that one of the challenges for child care is being able to write for enough slots to get an economy of scale to fund the associated services that are required in Head Start. So it's like, how are they going to have a disability coordinator, a family coordinator, a nutritionist to approve the menus, and can they, in an application, especially smaller providers, get to that economy of scale to provide the comprehensive services? Like if you have 10 early Head Start children, where and how are you getting those other services? That's led people to conceptualize, especially with a family child care model or whatever, a shared service model. But I just wonder, and this is a question I'm throwing out to everyone, if unless the smaller providers are coming together or latching on or linking up with some agency that has the capacity or already established array of coordinating and comprehensive services where they can allocate 1/10 of our disability services person's time is going to be doing that family child care home. Do you know what I mean? I think that's a hurdle for child care, and to understand the comprehensive services that are available. There were some partnerships where the child care really filled only the educational component, and the early Head Start program that partnered with the child care provided those comprehensive services, because the child care would have difficulty with that economy of scale to hire those people to do those divergent tasks with the qualifications necessary. So I'm just throwing that out for people to dialogue about.
And I think that's the beauty of this, that you can imagine different models where you have a hub in a community that provide the kind of services that we know infants and toddlers and their families really need. Health supports, more concentrated family engagement. I think they'll be open to all sorts of models that develop hubs in multiple different locations. I listened to a community talking about this yesterday, where they were going to put those kinds of comprehensive supports in key neighborhoods with high poverty, with high rates of poverty. So I think there's no one way to do this.
And that's another place where states that are building comprehensive services could potentially add value by partnering with your Part C program and other things in another model, and having it available to the larger community.
And I really feel like having a variety of models will be so instructive to us in the future. So I hope we have some really creative approaches to this. Other comments or questions?
This is Debbie from South Carolina.
Debbie.
Hi. I wasn't able to get onto the webinar, but I have been listening on the phone. I had a question from people who have maybe already done this about private investment, and I know that match often comes through state funds, but in any of these models, have they managed to also get private investment?
Good question. Tracy, how about you?
So I had to work to take myself off of unmute. For our Early Head Start partnership right now, we are not utilizing private investment for that partnership agreement. Each of our partners, as well as the office, is identifying either in-kind services from local community members, space, other resources that we're utilizing from state investment, but we have not, for this particular initiative, identified private resources.
Kate, how about you all? That's something you typically do.
This is Kate. I don't know where they're at with it right now. I know when we were writing that grant, I mean, the majority of what we were looking at using was State Smart Start. We had space donated and some other things. So we didn't go out and look, for a lot of private resources. I mean, I think there definitely are some in-kind things going on now, but I don't know if they've pursued that more as the program's gotten underway.
I should add that we've had 2 or 3 calls or meetings with the foundation community, a lot of interest by the funders in helping convene, in helping support the application process. So I would be reaching out to the state and local foundation world to help. I also heard something yesterday about a university getting involved from the beginning to do case studies on what might happen as a result of this. So I think, again, creativity is the order of the day.
Other thoughts?
This is Judy. I mean, I think that's one of the things that conceivably your child care partners could bring to the table. There's a lot of United Ways across the country that help programs, in particular serve low-income children by providing funding to close the gap between the state subsidy payment and the true cost of doing it well. So, I mean, I think looking at some of those things and inviting those folks in at the table at the beginning, as Joan said, would be a really good idea.
This is Kate again. I think now that I'm thinking about it, it's all coming back to me when Joan was mentioning local foundations. I know that our grant writer and the partnership, we did pursue a couple of small grants with local foundations. I think it is sort of hard to make the case, especially when you have a big federal grant. Sometimes it's hard to make the case to local and regional foundations that you need more money for it. So I don't know. We struggled, I think, a little bit trying to figure out what was the best fit and how to make the case for, a relatively small grant when you kind of have a big bottom budget line that you're saying that you get from the Fed. So I don't know if people have that experience.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have the money when you're preparing the application.
Yeah, right. That's true.
So Debbie, you in South Carolina need to take this on and show us how to do it.
That's right.
What else? Anything worrying you about this?
Hey Karen, this is Henrietta. I'm here with Wendy in Rocky Mount. Is there, and this is probably a question for Kate as well, is there a sort of a group size, or you have to do X number of slots in order to make the economy of scale work with this? I remember last time we looked at it that if you didn't do enough slots, you couldn't make the numbers work out. Does anybody have any guidance on that?
Kate.
I'm sorry. I think I understand the question. I mean, it's not like a requirement or regulation or anything that you. I mean, there are requirements about ratios and group size, but in terms of economy of scale, I don't think there's guidance about that. I think child care partners, in our experience, needed to have a full class or fairly full class of Early Head Start to make it work in terms of teacher requirements and all the other requirements. So I think we had wanted to do a lot more blended classrooms than we are really able to do. But I don't know specifics about what number you need to have for it to work financially.
Anybody else have a thought about that?
This came up on one of the webinars, and Linda talked a little bit about it. So I again encourage people to listen to those webinars.
One of the things, and it doesn't so much address the economy of scale question, but it's just another consideration in thinking about what I think Sherry talked about, the flexibility in the differentiation between early Head Start budgets, taking into consideration all kinds of factors that affect a grantee locally. As people consider what this early Head Start Child Care Partnership looks like, there needs to be that thinking around what are the supportive pieces of early Head Start that child care will need in terms of technical assistance. The added piece of will there be any agreed upon additional internal monitoring between the partners, and that's another consideration in terms of planning about the number of staff or the need for travel depending on how partners are arrayed. And really a caution that from our experience in understanding and starting to implement an early Head Start grant is if Head Start is expanding into early Head Start, it's not the same thing. Early Head Start has so many unique attributes to it that there's additional consideration about ramping up and becoming a really focused, comprehensive infant toddler service provider. And likewise, if early Head Start has been traditionally a home-based model, there are a lot of different considerations about bridging into delivering a center-based early Head Start model. And so it's just one of those things that, again, as much planning that people can begin to start to factor out what kinds of supports are needed, what kinds of technical assistance and professional development opportunities are needed, and not to shortchange themselves as they think about what those supports are.
Patty Purcell has brought up an issue of transportation. I'm curious if it was a challenge in both the models that we've talked about specifically today. Kate, was that an issue in Durham?
Yes, it was. I mean, to be honest, I'm trying to remember. I know it was an issue because transportation is a huge issue in Durham, and I know that we did not provide transportation through the Early Head Start grant. I mean, I don't think there was enough money to be able to provide the transportation and what all that entails. And I don't think, if I remember correctly, like we could help with bus passes and that sort of thing. So I do think it was an issue for us that we weren't able to address.
And how about you, Tracy?
We did not offer transportation either. We do, both of our partners and some of our original ERA-funded partners might support a family getting to a medical appointment, accessing transportation on an individual basis, but we were not transporting children into those center-based settings that we were offering when we operated them.
So there is a cost factor there, though, that needs to be put into your application, I would say.
Yes, if programs are thinking about transportation, it's the adequate safety requirements depending on what your state is, and then there's also the added piece that would be addressed in the Head Start performance standards about the number of staff, their qualifications, training, and background, and the type of actual vehicle. And again, just referenced that there's a wealth of resources available. I would suggest anybody considering transportation take advantage of looking at what's on the Early Childhood Knowledge and Learning Center.
Great resource. We have about 5 minutes left in our call, and I'm just wondering if, Joan, you have any final words for us, and Susan?
Just, thinking, listening to this, I just feel overwhelmed with happiness about the opportunity this provides for low-income families who, up to this point, often could not access an early Head Start program because it didn't fit the needs of them as a working parent. So I feel like this is a great opportunity. I hope we get a lot of creative models. I know there's a lot of challenges. Just listening to communities trying to work through some of this, but I think the opportunities outweigh the challenges, and I think it's exciting.
I agree, John, and thanks again for making so many opportunities for us to serve children and families. Susan, you want to talk about next steps?
Sure. And first, I really want to thank you, Karen and Joan and Tracy and Kate. This has been terrific, and all of you who participated. It's obviously just the beginning of a conversation. I just wanted to make sure that each of you knows the kinds of resources that are already being put up by federal staff. So we listed some of these here. I think there will be some great webinars coming up that the federal staff is putting together and that will focus in much more specifically on application requirements, et cetera. So make sure to look at those. I also want to mention that we will be holding a technical assistance meeting. Some of you will remember the Early Learning Challenge Collaborative meeting that took place a few years ago, where state teams came and could work as a team with technical assistance providers. And BUILD has been working closely with 0 to 3 and the Alliance and CLASP and the Ounce of Prevention on pulling together technical assistance providers on a host of issues that you've all mentioned today and that we think will be key to figuring out how to make the most of this opportunity. So a little bit probably later tonight because of various things, leaders in states will begin to receive an invitation to put together a team to this meeting. Obviously, we don't have unlimited funds and we don't have unlimited hotel rooms, and we're in the midst of negotiating that now. It's sort of short notice. But we will do the best that we can for the most states that can participate in it. And it would be a chance to both hear about some of the promising models, but really tangle with the issues of how to make this help us advance the systems for babies that we're trying to create. So I hope that that will be interesting and useful for many of you. We would love, obviously, to hear from you as soon as possible, both about if this interests you and what kinds of technical assistance you feel you need so that we can make sure to match you up with any resources that would be helpful to you. And the other thing we'd love to hear from you is if you think about a tool or a resource, or like CLASP has a number of materials on their website about early Head Start child care partnerships. Some of those might be updated to be specific to this opportunity. If you think of things that you know would help you, that would shortcut it so that all 50 states don't have to do the same work, something that could be created by any of the groups in the field, we'd love to try to help make that happen. So keep in touch with us about your worries and interests, and we hope to support you in this effort and squeeze the most out of this. So we've listed a few emails here of the BUILD team working on it, and as we communicate further over the next week or so, we'll also have the contact information for other TA providers from other organizations. So thank you so much for participating today, and again, Kate and Tracy and Joan and Karen, thank you so much.
And so finally, thank you